Good evening and welcome to CAN TV Community Forum, a community service of CAN TV. I'm your host, Karina. Joining us tonight is Randy Blankenhorn, the Executive Director of Chicago Metropolitan Agency for Planning, to talk about their campaign, Go to 2040. Imagine that. Welcome. Imagine that.
Imagine that. Thank you, Karina.
Randy, it's a pleasure to have you here. Tell us about the campaign.
Well, I think that what we're trying to do is create a new vision of Chicago and the Chicago region of what we're trying to be. The Chicago Metropolitan Agency for Planning is a relatively new agency. We've been here for about 2.5 years. We were brought together to combine the way we plan for the future. That we used to plan in different agencies, and the thought was that we needed to bring all the planning under one roof and really to think about the future in a much different way. And that's one of our requirements, is this new plan that we're calling Go to 2040.
Interesting. What created the need to bring the agencies together, do you think?
Well, I think it was that our local business establishment, our civic community, and our local elected officials looked at where we were as a region, where we were going, that we were doing transportation planning in one agency and environmental and land use and housing planning in another, and that just didn't make any sense anymore. Those two agencies...
So you've got transportation that takes you nowhere and you live over here, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
And so they really thought about how do we put this together in a different way, and it really is being driven a lot by that we're one economic region, and we've got to think that way, and our leaders really do understand that we can't fight Schaumburg against Elgin and Chicago against Rockford, that we've got to work together to make our economy grow and to make our communities stronger.
So what kinds of things are in the plan?
There are a number of basic elements of the plan. Obviously, transportation is a key piece, but it's not the driving piece that it used to be. In the old days,
Is that a pun? Not the
yeah,
driving
exactly.
piece. Oh, come on, Randy. Go ahead.
In the old days, when we did a plan, we'd kind of figure out what projects we wanted to build, and then we'd plan around it. And that's really not what we're trying to do any longer. We're saying, what kind of a region do we want? What kind of a future do we want? And then what kind of transportation projects help that? But it's also about housing. It's also about education. It's about economic development. It's about community lifestyle. It's about all the things that make a region great that we have to pull together into this planning process.
So how does it work? Like, as you're talking, I'm thinking about when I was a kid and we used to watch the Jetsons, and we had this image of what the life would be like at some point in the future when we'd all be driving around space capsules and things like that. I know that as just a resident here of the Chicago area, you know, you drive down the expressway and you're in traffic for an hour and a half or 2 hours, and you say, "What's happening? Who planned for?" You know, so give me some of the nuts and bolts. Like, how does it actually work? The plan.
Well, I think that for us it starts with a very simple process, and that's the vision. You have to create a vision. You have to decide what you want to be. And then you have to talk about what different strategies can get you there, because there are always different trade-offs. There's always different things you can do to get where you're trying to go.
Let me interrupt you there for just a moment. Is there a vision then, or is the vision still being created?
No, the vision is completed. It's been adopted by our board. We spent about the last 18 months working on it with the public and with our partners. It actually came out of some previous work out of the predecessor agencies, but we felt that it was important that we have something we could all agree on. We could talk about what does it mean for housing in the region? What do we want to accomplish? What does it mean for the environment?
So let me interrupt you again. So when you say even the public was involved in this, tell me a little bit about how regular folk.
There were a couple of ways that we've done it in the vision process, and then we'll do it differently throughout the rest of the process as well. Obviously, we're trying to use technology in different ways. We're trying to drive people to the website. We're trying to drive people to fun things to do in looking at their future and looking at things differently. So we did do that. We also had a number of what we're calling community conversations. And a community can be geographic, or it can be a different kind of a group of people, but let's get people together with common interests and talk about their concerns, talk about what their vision is for the future, talk about what they want for their children, because that's really what we're talking about. It's not for me, it's for my children and my grandchildren. And so how do we get those conversations started? Traditionally, planners have held a public meeting and called that public involvement, and that's not really enough. We need to get out to people. We need to get our residents thinking about this. As I talk to people around the region, I find that people care very dearly and greatly about their future, they just don't have time to think about it. There's too much tied up in the day-to-day of life, and how am I going to get to work tomorrow, and is gas prices going to go higher? But they really care deeply when you get a chance to talk to them about it. So that's what these community conversations are trying to do, is for them to spend an hour and talk about what's really important.
Okay. Interesting. You know, one of the guests that's been here on the show in the past was talking about issues for Latinos, for example. And we know that the city the population of Latinos has been rising and rising, and that Latino families tend to be larger than Anglo families. So then, you know, they were talking with me about how that impacts architecture. And how, you know, do you continue to build buildings that have 2 bedrooms?
Right.
When you have your average family has maybe 5 kids. So is that the kind of issue that would come into the plan?
It has to come into the plan. You know, we have changing demographics in Latino populations. We have more seniors than we used to, and we're going to have more seniors than we used to.
It's good news for me.
But I'm not going to want to move to Florida. I'm going to want to stay here. And so how do we create a region that accommodates our senior population? How do we make transit work better, because they're probably not going to drive? How do we make health care more accessible to them? How do we make it so that you can get to and from the grocery store? So these are the issues that are different in the future than they are today, and we've really got to spend some time thinking through.
You know, it's really interesting. I'm thinking the last time that I really spent an hour, you know, learning about stuff like this was probably like 4th grade, when they talk to you about city planning, and you start, you know, every time that you had to have a fire department, and you had to have a hospital, and you're doing this on a huge regional basis, taking into account the known, and also I think a little bit the unknown. Where is technology going to take us? What kind of transportation will be available in 2040 that we haven't even thought about yet?
Absolutely, that's a part of the concern. And the other piece of this is that we're a big, diverse region. We're a 7-county region, all the way from the farmlands of Kendall County to the urban core in the city. And the solutions that work in Chicago don't work in Lake County. And so we have to be able to look at what's happening and really create solutions that work for all of parts of our region, because that's part of what makes the region great, is that diversity of different kinds of communities.
Sure. Okay, so let's take you back to, you were telling me about the vision, and I took you on this whole, so paint a picture for me a little bit.
Well, I think that the vision really talks about what can be and not what is. And that's really where we want to go. The tagline of the 2040 plan is imagine that.
Imagine that.
And that's what we want people to do. We want them to imagine a different future. We want to talk about a transportation system that works. We want to talk about how we protect our parkland and open space, and we expand that so that we have neighborhood parks, so that we have green space for people. It's important. It's the only thing that seems to get voters' attention, is how to create more open space. How do we make the housing situation not where we are today in the foreclosure market, but in the long term, how do we look at housing? How do we put the kind of housing near the kind of jobs we have? How do we take care of low-income residents, but also our school teachers and our firefighters? How do we make it so that they can live in the towns that they work? So there's all of these issues that we bring together, all of these strategies that we'll be bringing together over the next several months to talk about what difference does it make. Because that's really, I think, the difference between this plan and other plans that are created in other regions, is that it's not just about the vision, it's about the strategies to make the vision happen. What do we have to do as a region to get here? If we're here and we want to be here, what's it going to take? What are the options? And that's what this plan is going to define. What are those issues? What are those strategies?
It sounds, now you're making me think about like morphing. You know, when you see the image, the face of the person that they are today, and then there's a projected image of what they'll look like in 40 years, and you see them go through the little tiny changes. You know, as I'm listening to you, I'm thinking, all right, so let's say that we have one of the brown line or the red line or the blue line or whatever it is, and it's in need of repair. So then the question becomes, do you repair it and keep it the same? Or do you start implementing modifications and say, well, this is where it is now, rather than invest in making it, you know, fixing it, let's start moving it towards where we want it to be.